Today on Cooking by Heart, we have the luxury of some additional conversation with John Sebastian. John talks about writing music for movies with Woody Allen and Francis Coppola, his experience with the beginnings of the tie-dye sensation, his serendipitous brush with immortality at the original Woodstock Festival, and we end with a conversation about his current recording project. Please, feel free to join us.
The first movie that the Spoonful got involved in was a Woody Allen movie called, it was called Pal for a long time. And then they changed the title. I was pissed. I'd written this title tune that I thought was great. Mm-hmm. So they changed the name to What's Up Tiger Lily, for which I had no song. But the Spoonful had a ball doing the music to that.
Oh, cool.
And so that was a kind of point of entry. Mm-hmm. And it was not very long after that Francis Ford Coppola gives a call somehow or another. I eventually get a call. And it's Francis.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we start talking. And I go, I don't know. My inside, as I'm listening, I'm going, this guy's from here. He's from my part of town, even.
Yeah. And he's Italian.
And he's Italian, and all of this stuff I'm accumulating in this first conversation. But anyway, we get together. He turns out to be so good. His instincts for music. And one of the reasons is his father's a musician.
That's right.
Who is also kicking ass on the few little cues that he gives him.
Yes.
They just like great orchestral cues.
Yeah.
And, but what he wanted from me was more like, he showed me the movie. And in fact, he played over a love scene. He played Monday. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, so I'm sort of that kind of thing,
mamas and papas.
Mamas and papas, yeah. Yep. And so I don't know, I had sort of a frame of Darling Be Home Soon, and it fit perfectly because it's sort of the same tempo.
Mm-hmm. A song that you had written previously?
Songs are often in progress. And I don't think I had really nailed it down by the time because by the time I recorded it, we were recording with orchestra.
Right.
Because that was the first opportunity or the first time I ever had any reason to be involved in, orchestral approach to things. So working with Coppola was fantastic. I learned a whole lot. My perfect example is he says, okay, now I want a theme for, he says, I got my lead lady, the good girl, and I got the bad girl. Thing is, my bad girl, she's just a little more appealing than my good girl. So I have to give the good girl a little push.
Yeah.
What I want is a piece of music that swells up under her when she first appears.
That buoys her.
We're going to use that as a weapon as time goes on.
Right.
And then, so we finish Amy's theme, and kind of proud of it. And I play it for him, and he goes, terrific. You know what I'm going to do? What? He says, I'm not going to use it for Amy. I may use it for Amy once, but I'm going to use it to the scene when he's walking around 42nd Street in the porn theaters and because that period where it was really, pre-Disney 42nd Street.
Yeah.
You could quickly see the setting. And he says, now I'm going to put that music under Bernard, the lead guy, while he's walking around 42nd Street. And you know why I'm going to do that? You know what the audience is going to be thinking when I do that? And the two of us go, I mean, I think it was me and Yanofsky are sitting there going, well, this is going to be a wrong answer. You know, we can tell.
Whatever we say, it's going to be wrong.
A wrong answer. And Coppola says, I'm going to put it under Bernard walking around 42nd Street. And the audience is going to go, he's thinking about that girl.
That's right. Yeah.
So these simple devices were things that, making 3-minute folky rock records had no experience. So, And unfortunately, with my previous experience with Woody Allen, he was quite detached from the thing. His movie was already completed. He wasn't particularly enthusiastic about not using orchestral movie music one way or another. But for one thing, I don't think they could afford that. They could afford us. Mm-hmm. And so some of those decisions were made that way. And it was certainly to our advantage because we learned a lot.
Interesting how those things turn out, isn't it?
It really is.
Going in, you never know what to expect, and the thing that one. I think of an expression that applies to people, but it also applies to situations. There's a wonderful line from a Philip Barry play called The Philadelphia Story. The time to make up your mind about people is never.
That's good.
Yeah, it's a great. I use this line all the time, if not in my head, just in life. But also, when you're going into situations, the time to make up your mind about what's going to happen is almost always counter to the way things end up. And so you have to remain fluid. You have to remain improvisational in a way.
Yeah. Good way of putting it.
Yeah. You've also done TV music, and you've one of the things that fascinated me is you are one of the progenitors, if I can put it that way, and you can probably expound on this a little bit more, of the tie-dye craze.
I learned it from Annie Thomas. A wonderful batik artist was where she sort of started and then became familiar with the dyes. And she was living on a little plot of land in Burbank. As you go down the hill to Studio City, there is an enormous apartment building, sort of a singles apartment building. But in the old days, it was a dirt road that went off to Lady Barham's hunting lodge, okay, from the 30s and 40s, when you could hunt in Burbank. So that eventually was rented out. It had several buildings, garages. And of course, in Los Angeles, you can live quite happily in a garage. I lived in a tent for a couple of years. And just if you had an alcohol heater for the few nights that was going to be too cold to, so it's very doable. Lots of different people were learning tie-dye from Tie-Dye Annie, as she became known. So I enjoyed her company tremendously. She was a real funny Brooklynese gal, just tough as nails, and did not suffer fools gladly in the midst of a lot of fools. I mean, we were really having a foolish period.
Wall-to-wall fools.
Wall-to-wall foolish at that time. And Ann Thomas is who taught me. And so what happened was I began to sort of show up with old shirts and then learn the various degrees of penetration you'd get from different degrees of absorption of water and dye. And all of this was fascinating to me. In that time, people would say that that's because you're a Pisces. and you like all of that watery stuff. So I was learning all of that, and I began eventually to say, no, I'm going to do some stuff where I actually start intending to make it this way. Mm-hmm. And I think that was where I went out and bought a pair of white jeans and a white jean Levi jacket, and began pretty slowly to tie-dye this jacket. And I was doing it very, very much in small pieces. I'd take it to 1 degree, get a lot of yellow all in there, and then let that dry and be out in the sun. This is a dye that operates by a photochemical process that actually, when you are making a yellow garment, you're working with an intensely purple dye.
Oh, interesting.
That you're having to imagine. Now, this is going to be yellow when I'm all done, right?
It's almost like pottery and glazes, where you don't really know what it's going to turn out to be when you first put it on. Yeah,
a very good parallel. Yeah. So eventually, piece by piece, I eventually had that jacket, and along the way, I had just a great turquoise, and I did a little something that Annie used to say, that's guitar fingers. That's why you can do that. And it was because I was able to get multiple surfaces of cloth folded in a certain way. Yeah. And then you just dip the part that's the fold and not the rest. Or before you do it, you tie it up and then you dip it. Now you get more veiny stuff. Anyway, it was fascinating.
Sounds fascinating.
And I had not intended, I'm going to crash Woodstock and it'd be a big surprise. I had no intention. And in fact, the day that I'd been talking to Paul Rothschild, my producer, and of course the wonderful producer of Janis Joplin and The Doors and a scad of Electra artists. And he had said, John, there's this thing in Woodstock, New York, and it's sort of still forming, but you ought to keep track of this because this could be crazy big. I don't think people realize how big this could be. Mm-hmm. I was pretty much a Paul Rothschild mini-me for a couple of years there, learning so many production skills, just sitting around watching what he was doing.
Right.
But I took his opinion very seriously. I went to the Albany airport. By some miracle, looking out on the tarmac, I saw a guy loading a helicopter, and it was the Lovin Spoonful's first roadie, who now was working for the Incredible String Band. Mm-hmm. I gestured to him because windows, there's doors where you can get down on the tarmac.
Right.
Crazy. So he pointed to the door, come down on the tarmac, which I did. And he quickly explained, or he said, you're trying to get to Woodstock. I said, that's right. He says, you're not going to be able to do it by anything but this helicopter.
Because at the time, all the roads were completely jammed, blocked. Nobody could get anywhere. People were walking for miles to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. No buses, no other way.
Nothing. No public transportation.
And so it was that I got in that helicopter, and in 20 minutes, I was getting that view that people who watch the movie get. At the beginning of the movie, when you're flying over the site and you're seeing nothing but sleeping bags and tents and Volkswagen buses. And
hundreds of thousands of people.
And that was when I sort of sat there going, Rothschild was right again. And so it was that I ended up there and just was wandering around this stage very often because there was no security. Right. There wasn't any need for security. We all knew each other. I was standing on the stage on Saturday, Michael Lang and I think Chip Monk, and they're standing around and saying, so what we really need now is somebody that can hold them while we sweep the rain off the stage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what we need is a guy who could like hold them with one acoustic guitar. We can't use the mics.
Right.
We can't use the amps because of this, the water on the
people are going to get
thing.
Electrocuted.
And I'm standing between the two guys and I'm listening to this, and that's pretty much what we need.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realize they're both looking at me. And I go, guys, I didn't bring any instruments. I thought I was coming as an audience, if you will, and nothing else. And I think it was Chip Monk who go in that fantastic voice. Well, you do have several minutes to find one. And luckily, Timmy Harden was in the sort of basement area of the stage, and he had just played. And I said, Timmy, can I borrow your harmony? And he said, sure. And he's not attached to instruments, but nearly as much as me and many of my contemporaries. So that was it. I was tuning as I'm running up the stairs, and got back up on stage and just tried to play, in that case, what I'd been working on the previous half a year, and which nobody was able to hear because MGM had been making it very difficult for Warner Brothers to put out my first solo album. It was delayed by a year and a half, which is in pop music and eternity.
Forever. Yeah.
It's forever.
Yeah. Well, the rest is history, as they say. And speaking of which, I want to know what's coming up for John Sebastian. What are you working on as an artist now?
Actually, this COVID kind of worked out and weirdly in my favor almost, because Arlen Roth and I have been friends for a very long time, and we began playing together, sort of starting to think about a project, because Arlen very often makes instrumental versions of famous records. He'll go, and it's usually because he's had a tour with the guy and played all the parts already.
Right.
Like Art Garfunkel, bingo. You want the Paul Simon guitar parts?
Right.
He's got it completely.
Right.
So he did a Simon and Garfunkel record, and he did Acoustic Stones, which was very interesting. And Catherine and I are listening to, Catherine's my wife, we're listening at dinner time, and I'm reacting to this stuff going, this is cool, and it's also a real good mood for who I am now, if you will. Yeah. So the next time that I talked to Arlen, I had to compliment him and say, man, these are really interesting projects. And he'd go, and you've never done this. I said, you mean like another version of a song? Yeah. No, I'm scared to death of doing that. Yes. What's the obvious? Okay. Here comes the old 70-pluser trying to sound like he's 25, and it's just a horrible equation, was what I had thought.
Right.
And Arlen said, well, we could do it, just you and me. And it just suddenly started to sound much more logical.
So you're revisiting the songs.
So we are
reimagining them.
Reimagining is a good term. Yeah.
And, I've heard that before, because I've been involved in a project where somebody was doing a quote unquote remake but they called it a reimagining. And I thought that's much more creative and interesting because you're going at it from a different perspective, where you are now.
Yes, right.
Not then.
And it was wonderfully easy. As Arlen said, when he was trying to convince me, he said, John, we'd have half the arrangements licked.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized what he's talking about is just want all of your guitar parts and I'll do everything else.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how it worked out. And I had recently done some stuff with Eric Parker, a wonderful drummer. And I had this great opportunity to play with Ira Coleman, the virtuoso upright bass player. Man, this instrument, he and this instrument just sound heavenly. Oh, it took me weeks to find out and kind of pull it out of him. Oh, yeah, when Sting goes on the road, I'm his bass player.
And when you're Sting's bass player.
I mean, please, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So anyway,
when the master says, "Here, take my instrument,"
that's pretty exactly amazing. Right.
Yeah.
And
so is this an album project?
So Arlen and I did an entire project, 2 chairs facing each other, Mike and Mike. If you screw up, you just do it again.
Yeah, right.
Kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. No overdubs, no.
Well, at that stage, no overdubs. Right. We're just doing it, right? And COVID hits, and suddenly we can't be in a studio. The studio's closed. Everybody, you can't do this and you can't do that. And especially you can't get together.
Yes, right.
So, but in talking to Arlen on the phone, I said, Arlen, this is one of our strengths. I mean, you do this and I do this. Guys mail you a thing and say, put a Telecaster on this. Guys mail me a thing and say, play harmonica on this.
Yeah.
So now let's approach this album like we're the sidemen and we got to decide what to add sparsely. And that's the key thing was we didn't want it to sound like a Los Angeles record where you filled in all the possible spots. And, so that was key to this project was that it came in these 2 stages, face to face for all the rhythm parts. Right. You see the drummer in right there, and Arlen and I began this process of overdubbing, and it just was going so well. And I said, Arlen, I have one thing that I haven't pulled out yet, which is that I became friends over the last few years with the Mona Lisa twins, 2 Austrian young women who are indeed real twins. And I was introduced when they sent me a little 3-minute video of them doing Daydream with one ukulele and a guitar. And it was the cutest thing I ever saw. And I wrote back to whoever had sent it to. It wasn't the twins, it was somebody else. But I wrote back and I said, you can't imitate this. This is sibling harmony.
Yep.
This is the Everly Brothers and the Boswell sisters and all of that stuff. And you're never coming close. And it's the best ever. Right.
Yeah.
A week later, I get an email from the twins. And they're saying, well, we are so glad that you liked our little version. And we'd like to know if you would play harmonica on this track of ours. Absolutely. I said, so I did the track and I worked to get this enormous harmonica sound because it's rocky what they were doing. And they loved it, called me again. I did another background part for them. And then the next time I got a call, the oldest, by 2 minutes, sister is saying, we're having trouble imagining making this video without you. Could we possibly talk you into coming to Manchester and making the video with us? These young Austrians have moved over the years. They were living in Liverpool because they were playing the Beatles club, at least the new iteration of the cellar.
Right.
It was torn down, and then the town fathers realized they'd torn down the biggest tourist attraction ever. So they had worked all kinds of hard in Liverpool. Eventually, they moved to Manchester. So it's very easy for me to be convinced by the twins to get on a plane and go to Manchester. So anyway, I had a marvelous time with them, made that video. So that was one thing that happened. And then I said, don't pay me. I'm going to do something. I don't know what. But next thing I do, I'm calling you guys because I want you to sing on whatever I'm doing.
Right.
And that's a hastily made international a musical agreement, which comes to fruition with the John and Arlen record. And they come in and they do some background parts that just stun me. And so I still have a couple of kind of rockier things that I'm doing. It just so happens that Jeff Muldor has moved into my town. He is the virtuoso soloist from the Jim Kweskin Jug Band and Better Days. And he kind of holds back from stardom in a certain way, but is just a miraculous singer. And I was doing jug band music over again. And I said, Jeff, would you tenor me on this? Which he did. And then I said, let's do the same thing with Make Up Your Mind. And he tenors me on that. And then he eventually leaves town. And then very soon thereafter, Maria Muldor comes to town, as she frequently does. She used to live in Woodstock. And I draft her on one afternoon to come and sing a tune called Stories We Could Tell together. And so, that's what became this project. John and Arlen Explore the Spoonful Songbook.
Is it out?
It is out. Yes.
Well, John, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
All right. And that question I ask everyone at the end of our podcast, and that is, what's the one meal that when you think about your childhood, when you think about growing up, what's the one meal that brings back the most extraordinary kind of palette of memories of people and of a particular story? Say, what's the one food that does it for you?
Ravioli nudi.
I knew it. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, this has been one of my most enjoyable times talking to anybody, I must say. John, I find you fascinating. Such a wonderful raconteur, an extraordinary human being, and an amazing artist.
And a Greek and Italian had a conversation and didn't end up yelling.
That's right.
It takes some doing.
Considering the number of times we've conquered each other, it's a miracle. John Sebastian, thank you so much. Thank you.
Chris.
All right, it's been a pleasure.